and join GIS's global network of football leaders. Apply now to start in February 2023. Learn more at gis.sport/FNR. That's gis.sport/FNR.
Since 1998, Lanco Group has been providing superior civil engineering solutions and advice to developers, local government and service authorities across Australia. Lanco Group is known for delivering sustainable, efficient solutions. By working closely with clients, Lanco Group is able to meet the complex infrastructure requirements for residential, commercial and industrial developments on time, on budget. Find out more at lancogroup.com.au. Lanco Group, your business partner for engineering solutions.
Ever wanted a career in football? At the Global Institute of Sport, you can now study a master's degree in football business or football coaching and analysis right here in Australia. GIS is the largest provider of sports degrees in the UK, with campuses at Wembley and Etihad Stadium. Learn online with unique access to the iconic MCG and a big-hitting Australian industry network. Be one of the first Australians to get a football master's degree and join GIS's global network of football leaders. Apply now to start in February 2023. Learn more at gis.sport/FNR. That's gis.sport/FNR.
Vickery looking to build. Barbarouses is quick. Is he in behind Topo Stanley? It doesn't matter! Costa Barbarouses! Wow!
Like a salmon, a spawning salmon. And Diamante again! Oh, he's done it!
Unbelievable kick from Maria.
T-2 days. After another instalment of the world's longest off-season, that is how close we are to the start of another A-League men's campaign. And we're getting ready to preview that opening round here on the Oz Football Hour. Lachie Flanagan and Jason Goldsmith back with you for another week. Jason, 2 days out. Can you believe that we're? I mean, I guess you can believe that we're saying it.
I can, but
it's nice to be saying it.
It's great to be saying it, Lachie. Good to be here. It's mixed emotions all this week. There's so much good news that we've had with Australian football this week, and we've also had some very, very sad and flat news as well in the last week. So let's get excited about the football season coming up and the games we've got this weekend. Hopefully the weather doesn't ruin those on the east coast of Australia, but there's some interesting matchups. So we're just running through a few teams as well, looking at new players and players that have changed clubs. And yeah, at this stage of this season, there's 12 possibilities.
Yeah, I mean, I have an honest, and I told you as much before we went to air, I have an honest to goodness headache, having tried to sit here before and thought, oh, who do I think is going to be good? I genuinely think you could make a case for at minimum 10 of the 12 teams being finals contenders.
Absolutely. And then, of course, we've got, as always with an A-League season, we've got all these international players that some are going to be fantastic and some are going to be flops.
Yeah,
and we don't know which one's which.
It's a uniquely difficult league to predict because, the traditional Australian football fan follows a team in Europe and a team in Australia. That's the way things go. Following your team in Europe, trying to predict that season is easy because if you see a new signing, more often than not, you already are familiar with the player. You know where they've come from. We know where these players have come from in the A-League, but there's an abundance of information and footage of who they are, what they do. There's probably a scouting report written by some very intelligent analyst. It's not necessarily the same. We've had situations here in Australia where the players signed for a club in the A-League and hasn't even had a Wikipedia. I mean, that happened with Rai Marchand last year, and I remember this time last year being like, how good can a guy without a Wikipedia page who's most recently played in Andorra really be? But he's been brilliant, and I'm looking forward to seeing him play more this year.
True, and we've also signed players based on highlights packages, which like Mario Jardel, which would be massive flops based on what they have done previously. So it's an exciting time. It's great. You're going to see what's coming up.
There's a lot of excitement, a lot of surprises on the horizon, but we should start with looking back on the week that was, and more specifically the Australia Cup final on Saturday night, which of course ended 2-0 in favour of Macarthur, but sadly, as a result of some of the off-field incidents that took place, the scoreline and the result itself has really been the last thing that we've been discussing, Jason.
Press releases and statements, I think we're getting very, very used to reading those. We've had some come from, Football Australia. We have ones come from the Professional Footballers Association. We have some come from Sydney United themselves, the AAFC, et cetera, all condemning and apologising for the behaviour of certain sections of the crowd during the Australia Cup final. So it kind of put a blight on the fact that we were talking it up last week here about how exciting it is to finally have an NPL club make the final and take on an A-League club for some silverware. The Croatian tournament on being held in Sydney at the same time, which would swell the crowd. It was... And let's talk about some good things here. It was a record crowd for an Australia Cup final as well. So over 16,000 punters attended. It's just some crowd behaviour has really, really marred what should have been celebrated and had a lot of football fans and pundits and everyone feeling very, very flat. I think flat's the right word because it's just disappointing.
Yeah, I mean, that was my overriding emotion, after the events of the weekend was just sad. One of despair, really. Predominantly for the people who were impacted by some of the things that happened as a result of the game. Obviously, the displays of fascist iconography and fascist salutes predominantly, are things that I could not stand further enough against. I don't really want to I'm not an expert on Balkan politics, and I don't pretend to be, and I don't purport to be. And I know that there are some various differences of interpretation when it comes to chanting and differences of interpretation with respect to the PA system and the in-ground experience versus what we saw on the TV when it comes to the anthem, the welcome to country. But fascist salutes are cut and dry. They are obvious. They are clear and they are wrong. And anyone who...
And to be fair, they're known too.
Yeah,
right.
Anyone who engages in those, I cannot condemn that strongly enough, and I
agreed.
Terribly sad for the people who were impacted by those events. And it's good to see Football Australia today coming out with a statement that one person from the game has been identified and subsequently banned.
Action has been taken, which is fantastic.
And you would expect, at least relating specifically to these displays, overt displays of fascism, or fascist salutes, that there's more to come from in that regard.
Yeah, I guess there's been a focus on different aspects of the behaviour. So there's probably about 4 different ones. So that one's in terms of the salute, and that's been addressed. So that's fantastic. The welcome to country is an interesting one, and there's been talk about the booing was perhaps directed at the Macarthur fans that were featuring on the big screen at that time. The lady performing that was distressed. She was visually distressed. I was only watching on television, so she was a little bit uncomfortable with what's happening. So perhaps we can look at different aspects of that in terms of getting the crowd to be a little bit more respectful for when that happens. The Welcome to Country has been a magnificent addition to Australia in only the last 4 or 5 years. I never used to be a part of it, but it's wonderful to learn the country that these players are going to be on. So that's something that we need to look at, making sure that becomes just as respectful as the national anthem. I guess the call and response thing for me was the hard one, because that came through quite audibly through the television coverage throughout. In that we're talking about a chant that was used from a regime in the 1930s and 1940s. So it's sort of pre-World War II stuff. It's almost 100 years ago, right? It's almost 100 years ago. So it's consigned to history. I'm not sure that most of that crowd understand what they were doing. Some of them would have been, but I don't think all of them would have been. You're caught up in a call and response kind of moment. Can't condemn that enough. I mean, Joe Simonic, the Australian-raised Croatian player, was part of that same call and response, and FIFA suspended him for 10 games. He missed the World Cup because of it. So it's clearly not on. So that part of the process needs to be addressed as well. And then today there's some distressing footage that's emerged today as well, with some after Toure scored his penalty, the first goal, some other crowd sort of taunting him in an inappropriate manner as well. So hopefully that person can be identified similar to the one with the salute and action taken, and I'm sure that will occur in due course. So I don't want to condemn all of the Croatian fans. I think people were caught up in that call and response, but the fact that what it represents is inappropriate. I want to see, forever Croatia banners, and I want to see the history of these clubs recognised and the momentum build towards a national second division, because these are the type of clubs that will form a national second division and give it the colour and life that it deserves. And I think how much has been condemned and all the statements and some of the action that's been taken already has shown that we're not going to stand for it. And they've moved pretty quickly, I would have thought, and hopefully they can do the same with the person identified today in those videos, and then we can move on, because we were sitting here last week talking up how good the Australia Cup's been, how good it was NPL sides were knocking off A-League teams and the difference it made, and we had a record crowd for it and everything else, which is completely undermined by the crowd behaviour. Yeah,
I think that's fair enough. And while I stand totally against all of those sort of actions and elements of what we saw with that particular section of fans, as you pointed out, it's important to remember that, well, not other than that, because it is the significant and sort of focal point of what's happened, but there were plenty of people who were contributing a positive element
absolutely
to that game. But I stand against the things that went wrong, but I also didn't really agree and can't stand by the side of those who tried to use what happened as a vehicle for some of the arguments I saw saying that this is the reason that we got rid of ethnic clubs from the top flight. This is why we need to bring back the NCIP. It should never have gone. I can't stand by and accept those kind of arguments.
No, neither do I.
As well.
No, we need to recognise there is a place for the newer clubs, the A-League clubs that have been around, the newer expansion clubs that have been around. One of them who haven't even mentioned really, we should have been talking about, that Macarthur won their silverware for the first time in a magnificent effort. Dwight York's first tournament as a coach, and he's successful. We should be talking about De Villa giving his medal for the best player on the pitch to the chairman in support of the personal tragedy that he dealt with only 4 months or so ago. And instead, us, every other sort of media outlet, podcast, even the mainstream media have all had to address it. And the Premier of New South Wales was talking about it. We don't want to be in the news for these reasons, right? We want to be celebrating a record crowd at Combank Stadium that saw, an NPL team make the final for the first time, but it hasn't been the case this week, and that's made everyone really flat. And they've taken action today. Let's take action against the next lot that's turned up, and we can hopefully move on. Yeah.
The more people that can be identified who engage in those practices and be punished to send a strong message, individuals, the better. But I think also at an internal level, at Sydney United, we've seen them put out a number of statements which are encouraging, but I think they
need some action.
And I think I can only imagine behind closed doors need to be actively assisting Football Australia in not just identifying people who might have been involved in those sort of activities, fascist salutes, that kind of thing, but also in making sure that a punishment is actually upheld as well. And if that person does try to attend a game or something, you actually say, we can't allow you in here. And just to sort of speak with their internal groups and say, that if we want to take this sort of step, return to a national stage, and there is going to be every club is going to have problems with different elements, I guess. These kind of things they can't happen.
And they probably have to go right back to being on their best behaviour. So they can't storm the pitch when they knock off an A-League team at King Tom like they did when they beat the Roar and that kind of thing. They need to be, come straight back into line. Just any kind of stuff up is going to really, really hurt them, and in turn that hurts the code and it hurts all of us.
But at the very least, it's good to see that hopefully more people have been identified, because we have, and I do recommend that individuals rather than collective necessarily is the focus of punishment. We have had other incidents in the A-League as well,
of course,
where individuals haven't been singled out and punished as recently as last season. There's a particular event I can think of where no one in the end actually received punishment for what happened. So I hope this sets the tone, sets a precedent for what will happen from here on in, as opposed to it's an exception rather than a rule.
Agree completely. So let's change the tone a little bit. Let's talk about the tournament and the winner of the Mike Cockrell medal, shall we? Because someone that you know quite well. So the Mike Cockrell medal is given to the best player that from a non-A-League team that hasn't played professionally in the round of 32 onwards, and it was awarded to Oakley Cannons' Joe Guest.
Yeah, well, this is definitely going to change the tone, because nothing improves my mood, I guess, Jason, like the chance to take a personal victory lap.
Okay.
I just want to congratulate Joe Knowles for a stellar NPL campaign and a stellar Australia Cup campaign. Now, a lot of people will look at this and say, well, a lot of people are saying, oh, well, Daniel Nizic should surely be winning. But the criteria was put out in advance of the award being announced, and I am not trying to take away from the quality, and it was quality campaign in the Australia Cup that Daniel Nizic did have. He was brilliant.
Yeah.
But you can't have been a professionally contracted player. That's the criteria. And just as others have missed out over the years, Daniel Nizic missed out. But I think in Joe Guest, we had an extremely worthy recipient. I mean, he lodged off his own back a handful of goal of the tournament contenders. He is a key cog in this Oakley side that, yes, they sort of fell away quite easily in the end against Macarthur, but before the injury to Aaron Williams and in the game before against Sydney FC, not only got results, but played in a really positive way against A-League opposition. They brought a lot to the competition, much in the same way Sydney United did, and I thought Joe Knowles, if it wasn't going to be Daniel Nizic, if the criteria is going to work against him, I just personally thought pretty much the moment we saw that criteria confirmed by Football Australia, I think I immediately went and messaged people, it has to be Joe Guest. And indeed it was, and I couldn't be happier for the guy.
And signed for 3 years during the season as well, from what I understand, for Oakley Cannons. So, fantastic award. It's only the fourth time the medal's been awarded.
He'd be the second player of English descent as well, I think, because...
Are you looking? What's in front of my screen? Yes, Fraser Hills.
Yeah, Fraser Hills.
Yes.
From Brisbane City.
That's right. And then we had Elvis Camsober, obviously, probably the most celebrated one thus far, who then has gone on to play in the A-League and now sign I think he's in Iran, isn't he? He's in Tehran for a club.
Yes.
And Finn Beakhurst for Lions FC. So amazing result for Joe. So that's fantastic. So well done and congratulations to him.
Yes. Shall we talk a little bit? We did sort of mention it earlier. Shall we talk a bit more about the actual on-pitch goings on in this game? The win for Dwight York, the medal and the championship for Ulysses Davila as well?
Perhaps. Sydney United looked tired to me. They looked like they had run the race from the start. I think Arzani and Toure and Davila, they sort of just bossed them around, and they had majority of possession and like a very sort of boring cup final. They did enough. A couple of penalties that were definitely there and able to put them away. 2-0 win, one penalty in the first, the one in the second half. So it was a little bit disappointing because the atmosphere was quite strong in terms of the noise. Nastiness aside, the noise in the atmosphere was quite good there to start off with, but it just was quite obvious to me early that Sydney United weren't going to put up much of a show.
Well, a large part of that was the quality of that front four that Macarthur had on offer, spearheaded by someone you mentioned, Daniel Arzani, obviously Alassane Toure, who scored one of the penalties, and the man who ultimately won the medal for best of field, which was Ulysses Davila. I mean, and ultimately the man at the head of it all is Dwight York, who, as you pointed out, has, in his short stint as manager, has already managed a piece of silverware and has got the hype train where it relates to Macarthur well and truly running, and people are queuing up at the station to get on board. Are you punching your ticket on the Macarthur hype train as well?
I'm not sure. We discussed this off air too. Like their run at the cup final was pretty easy for A-League opposition, I'm guessing, in a couple of state second division type teams as well as they went through the process. I got questions about their defence when it comes to A-League, so I'm not going to buy into the hype train just yet. But let's see. Let's hope for the good of Australian football we get magnificent seasons out of Arzani and Toure, because they're hopefully the future. They're still very, very young and still options for us moving forward. So a great win, a great start. They couldn't do much else than beat they come up against. We'll see how they go. And who do they kick off with? They play Brisbane or away the first week. So we'll see how that works out.
I mean, it's hard to believe, really, looking at this game and looking at the lineup that took the field, that there's someone like Alassane Toure who has been dazzling in the Australia Cup games. I've watched them play, again, albeit they have played two second-tier NPL sides in Modbury and Mackay with Sunday. They got that win over Wellington and then played Oakley and Sydney United. Sydney United, I think we can give them a legitimate tick for that one, because Sydney had some pretty impressive performances against A-League sides. But it's hard to think that someone like Alassane Toure, who has dazzled so much, is probably not even going to start for this side when Craig Noon is back, when I think their striker Tachana Arabuli, I think is his name, is up to full fitness, is linked in. Alassane Toure is going to be fighting to keep his spot in the team, and that is a scary thought. I think you do make a great point though about that back four. Maybe there's a few weaknesses there, particularly at fullback, and that might be an area that against top tier, teams that have attacks as good as Macarthur do, that might be an element that works against them. I think, again, they'd be one of my 10 of 12 teams that are in the finals conversation.
You can't write them out. With the attacking options that they've got, you can't write them out.
I mean, I think irrespective of whether or not they actually make the finals or have a significant run, what I care about more than that is that Macarthur are now a team that excite me.
Yeah.
They have never, in their pretty much 3 years of existence now? This is their third year?
Third season.
Oh, sorry. In their previous 2 years of existence, have scarcely excited me and rarely excited many others because of the way they've always had good players, but now it seems with this more, at least from the outside looking in, laissez-faire approach to coaching under Dwight York. Creative players, of which they've always had, are being given the scope to actually create and be a bit more artistic and fluid. And even if that doesn't give them enough to get into the top 6 or make a tilt for a title or something like that, I still think that'll be a welcome improvement, if not to Macarthur, just to the league as a whole.
Absolutely. And I think their highlights package is going to be something worth watching every week, because if you've got someone with the creative genius of Arzani, if he's given the opportunity, plus Craig Noon, all the guys you mentioned, they're going to score a lot of goals. They're going to leak a lot of goals, but they're going to score a lot of goals. Their highlights are going to be well worth watching this season, that's for sure.
Absolutely. Well, Macarthur getting that elusive piece of silverware. Where to next, Jason? Where are we heading away from the Australia Cup? Where are you taking us?
Let's talk television. Let's talk Paramount Plus and documentaries, I guess. So I'm wearing the Wrexham scarf tonight because the A-League have started with their own documentary series with Sky Blue, Sydney, the Sydney Doco, and they're going to also
watch the first episode.
Watch the first episode so far. So it's kind of interesting watching it, knowing you know how they perform during the season with these things. So so far so good. I don't mind it. They've got a lot to live up to, and I think the A-League, the access or the all access stuff that's coming up this season is exciting as well. And I think what we're looking at is the A-League's men and women trying to promote and push the game, not to the converted, not to people like us, but try and push it to other people that might be interested in that style of television, and hopefully that sort of, carries on and produces something else.
Absolutely. I mean, the Sydney FC, I've seen the first episode. It kind of feels like the calm before the storm, and I'm a lot more interested in, given we know what happens with the season, I'm a lot more interested and place a lot more stock in what the episodes that are to come are going to look like. Because again, and this is my one hesitation, I've been pleased to see the announcement of A-League's All Access. I enjoyed seeing some high quality footage of the A-League. Even the actual production value of the show was sort of enough for me. But the one thing that gives me pause for thought where it relates to these documentaries is inevitably there will come times where these clubs will have to expose themselves to criticism, to embarrassment, to potentially certain things, within reason, of course, seeing the light of day that they won't necessarily want to. Now, I think a lot of people from an internal PR perspective would look at those sort of things leaking out to the public eye and see them as bad. And to an extent, I can understand that, because a lot of A-League sides have been burnt before, or just soccer in general has been burnt before by bad things happening, or things being perceived in a bad light. But I think that those moments of, I don't want to say failure, but those moments of challenge, those moments of rawness to the point of maybe being a bit embarrassing or something like that, are the strength of these sports documentaries.
I agree completely. That makes for good television or good watching. Exactly. So Sunderland Till I Die is probably the flagship one that we want to put up, and that's the season where they get relegated. They run out of money. Jack Rodwell doesn't want to get transferred, right? It's real.
It's authentic.
It's authentic, but they had a season from hell, and they had to be documented that whole season, right? So I agree, really, really good. I think they're going for that whole Drive to Survive model where they want to attract people, because I think it had the hallmarks of the whole Bling FC thing about being the biggest club in Australia, or that, having Anthony LaPaglia as the narrator, claiming Sam Kerr as one of their own, I thought was a bit of a stretch, but I mean, that's the market they're targeting. They're targeting people not like us that know she's predominantly Perth Glory from an A-League women's point of view, rather than the season or two she had at Sydney FC, but they're not targeting us. We're not the market. So I think it's great. I think we have the other option there to watch it. So if you turn up late for, an A-League game and you can't watch it on Paramount, you've got the other options, because you can't watch from the start or rewind the live coverage, then you can watch a doco and wait for the replay to come back up.
Yeah, I mean, before we move on to that, or you just that is kind of the reason I brought up the point about the authenticity, the exposure to criticism, because we all know that from this point onwards, the Sydney FC documentary, what happens on the pitch, the season they have. Yeah. And again, this is by Sydney standards. This is not by global sporting standards necessarily, is bad, is a bit of a dumpster fire. So what happens from here? How much embarrassment and criticism do they are willing to expose themselves to? We've seen these sort of, board level conversations about, how long do we give Steve Cockrell? What do we do? We know he doesn't go anywhere. So what happens from here? How much they sort of expose themselves in a bad but good way is key, and might give us a window into what we can see and expect from the upcoming A-Leagues documentaries. Yeah,
and when does it end, right? I want the Ninkovic episode, right? Will you imagine that, right? So they go to the season ends and they go into the A-League men's finals and the A-League women's finals. Obviously, the women's going to take quite precedent towards the end of it, leading into the Women's World Cup will be good. But the off-season episode where, what we've, all the hearsay about Ninkovic needing to get citizenship and then jumping across to their rivals and all the rest of it, that would be amazing television. So that is that sort of embarrassment element that you talk about. That would be fantastic to watch, but we'll see how that goes. But the more content, the better, I guess. They can't really complain too much when it comes through there.
Yes. And as you said before, content that can be paused and replayed because it's on demand. But that's not something, unfortunately, that we're going to be able to say about the starting games of this A-League men's season, because at 10:01 we saw the announcement, a tweet come out from the Paramount Plus Australia account at 10:01.
Yeah.
Interesting time I'd have thought to pump out an announcement like this, and just on a solitary tweet which read, "Dear football fans, we want to be upfront with you, and unfortunately Live Pause and Rewind won't be ready for the start of the 2022-23 A-Leagues season." Not the A-League men's season, A-League season. I don't know. Can we read something into that? Anyway, we understand your frustration and we're continuing to work on this feature. As soon as it is ready, we will let you know. Jason, your response to this, I will get in a second, but I'm going to preface your response by saying that the internet's response has been, or the soccer Twitter response has been to launch into what many refer to in internet parlance as a ratio.
Yes.
Because this tweet that Paramount put out has 265 likes, 298 replies, and 199 quote tweets. Now, those who maybe are not au fait with the internet, the general rule of thumb is if you have more replies to your tweet than you do likes, whatever you've put out has probably been quite poorly received by its audience. But, Jason, your response to this announcement from Paramount Plus.
We just talked up how good these documentaries are going to be and the rest of it promoting the game. This is horrible. This is a horrible own goal, because this is when they announced Paramount were taking on, and one of the things last season which was difficult with all the rescheduled games, it was difficult with the promotion of the television. We've got a brand new streaming service that people had to jump on. People jumped on because they're fans of the A-League, right, or the A-Leagues. And it doesn't have a play from start option. It doesn't have the replays up very quickly. It doesn't have pause and rewind options. We need to fix this, all right? So that was identified probably round one last season, okay? So we're talking 12 months ago, right? That's identified 12 months ago. That is one key thing that people who stream football want and need. So they've had a long time to get it right. Every other streaming service that covers football has these options. There's probably another 3 or 4 that we can run through. So if you want to KO, Optus, Stan, have all got these options, right? And then they come out and say they don't have it. And the thing about it is that sport wasn't their main bread and butter for Paramount. This is sort of a new market, moving into football, all the rest of it. But how could you not get that? That's just the basic that they needed to get up and running Well, I think we mentioned off air, Danny Townsend said, yes, that's one of the main things we're going to look towards fixing, and then announcing it 2 days before the A-League season. So most people that are fans of Australian club football that want to watch this have already paid their subscription fee. More often than not, 12 months up front, ready to go. And then when the functionality is not there, it's just, again, disappointing and makes it a little bit flat leading into the season starting.
It was July 24th when Danny Townsend took to Twitter to say that we've all been told that it will be ready for the new season, so expectations are set. Now, I'm not saying that Danny Townsend is sitting in the back end of Paramount
No.
Plus and saying, can we sort of improve this bit? I know it's not his responsibility, but I don't think it's a great look to be.
It's not. I mean,
for either predominantly for Paramount, but also to be making promises that aren't kept, even if that's out of his control. It's not great. And as you said, the timing of this announcement. I mean, Paramount say we want to be upfront with you. I mean, 2 days out from the A-League season, I am not in the Paramount IT department. I'm not, creating the stack for their streaming platform or anything. But I would say that this possibility of certain features not being ready for the start of the season would have been apparent before 2 days out.
Yeah, absolutely.
This could have come out, as you mentioned earlier, at a time before people had committed money to the platform. Now, that's not to say there haven't been some improvements. There have been a few changes. There's been a schedule added. People can see what time live games can kick off. There have been a few adjustments, but for a lot of people, this will be, or for some people, particularly people who've got children, people who might have work, this will be
football training
a
on
deal
Friday,
breaker.
something like that.
This will be a deal breaker. And to find out that a deal breaker has been inserted into their clause after they've potentially subscribed, it's not a great look.
If I've gone to a kid's sport or a party or something and the game starts at 7:30 and I get home at 7:45, I want to watch it from the start. Watch it as it's live, pretend that it's live. And you know what I think's happened? I don't think the A-Leagues have got a leg to stand on with the TV deal, because what's actually happened, if we go back to when Paramount started, there was always those the TV rights were up for grabs, and there was a danger that they were going to miss out on any money and miss out on any deal whatsoever in terms of the TV rights, because Fox didn't want it. If you recall, Fox didn't want it. We're going to go somewhere. They got, we got a deal. We got all this money thrown at us from Paramount. They might have just signed the contract without putting in, actually, you need to have some functionality. Like, we will show all of your games. That's no problem. Maybe that's all they've signed off on. So Paramount have got no development costs within the contract to say, we're doing what we signed. We show every game live. That's what you want. That's what we signed off on the contract, and we are doing that. Why would they throw any extra development monies? Because perhaps because of these issues, they haven't got the extra subscribers they would have hoped for, because people aren't jumping on because they don't have visibility. Disappointing. But that being said, like, some of the things that they're doing, and last season aside, because of all the rescheduled games and all the rest of it, we talked about the fixturing this coming season, and then there's a standalone Saturday night game on free to air. A massive, massive addition to what was going on. When we had 2 or 3 games going on at the same time, and the rest of it on Saturday night. So Channel 10 now has a free run at it with Saturday night games. So if they don't cut to ads during the play, that's going to be worthwhile.
I was listing off things that have been improved with the broadcast, and I do want to note the introduction of these sort of in-play ads that we've seen, the little lower thirds that come up promoting the Sydney documentary, the lower third. We saw like fade in and out of the screen in the bottom right-hand corner of your television, promoting Western United, Melbourne City. The sort of background or the framing, kind of almost picture-in-picture, but not quite, where we see the screen, the actual match sort of reduce in size slightly, and then you get the ad around the outside. Those are all good things. They're much better than the alternative. There have been strides made. And look, we could probably end up talking in circles about this is bad. It needs to have been here already. I'm sure that's not a surprise or a shock to anyone. I guess the question now is how much longer is it going to take? Because if Danny Townsend needs to say and get a commitment from him. I mean, how far do we have to get into the season before like serious conversation? Like I would say, if this isn't a reality and a part of the streaming, experience for A-League fans, A-League men's and women's fans, before halfway through the men's season.
Well, what happens when the World Cup's on? They're not showing any football on Paramount at all, are they? So you got a 4-week window. Surely you can get some developers.
Well, 3 weeks. I think it's 3-4 weeks off. Yeah, it's not a long time.
Well,
but that maybe that's the perfect. That's perhaps the perfect time.
They need to get it right. Anyway. That's Paramount's little, and it almost broke the internet in terms of people just going, "Are you kidding? You've had that long to fix it. It's our number one bugbear."
Yes, but
this is how people watch sport.
Paramount have been, they are well aware of the problem. They have been ratioed online, and hopefully we don't have to have this conversation.
Last one, hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully this is the last time we have to talk about this. But on demand or live, the A-League season will start this weekend.
Absolutely.
And we will get to talk about the opening round of games. We might take a short break here on the Oz Football Hour just to decompress from that lack of a pause button. We're going to take a pause.
Yeah, let's refresh.
Just so everyone can know what that feels like. So after a break and on the other side of this, we'll preview the opening round of the A-League men's season.
Ever wanted a career in football? At the Global Institute of Sport, you can now study a master's degree in football business or football coaching and analysis right here in Australia. GIS is the largest provider of sports degrees in the UK, with campuses at Wembley and Etihad Stadium. Learn online with unique access to the iconic MCG and a big-hitting Australian industry network. Be one of the first Australians to get a football master's degree and join GIS's global network of football leaders. Apply now to start in February 2023. Learn more at gis.sport/FNR. That's gis.sport/FNR.
Since 1998, Lanco Group has been providing superior civil engineering solutions and advice to developers, local government and service authorities across Australia. Lanco Group is known for delivering sustainable, efficient solutions. By working closely with clients, Lanco Group is able to meet the complex infrastructure requirements for residential, commercial and industrial developments on time, on budget. Find out more at lancogroup.com.au. Lanco Group, your business partner for engineering solutions.
Maloney takes, and it's in! It's Ben Watson! It's Ben Watson for Wigan Athletic! They've surely won the FA Cup! For Dave Whelan, for Roberto Martinez! You just cannot write scripts like this!
Looking to build. Barbarouses is quick. Is he in behind Topo Stanley? It doesn't matter! Costa Barbarouses! Wow!
Like a salmon, a spawning salmon. And Diamante again. Oh, he's done it!
Unbelievable kick. Mamma mia.
We're back here on the Oz Football Hour, getting ready for our round one preview, looking at what looms as a very exciting opening weekend of matchups for us to dissect, Jason. But before we get into that, I do just want to, we're not the only people coming back. We're back from the break, but someone who is back supporting this station is the Global Institute of Sport. Now, if you don't know about GIS, they're a service that provide master's degrees in football. They have campuses inside stadiums around world football, including at Wembley, most notably, but also here in Victoria at the MCG. And if you're interested in being part of a master's degree, potentially in football business, they also do one in coaching and analysis. There is an online course available with unique access and touch points at the MCG, as I mentioned. If that's of interest to you, be sure to head over to gis.sport/FNR. I mean, a course to be educated inside the MCG or even at Wembley.
Rather than listen to us. Yeah, absolutely, of course.
Well, no, you can do both. You could actually listen to the Oz Football Hour. Maybe that's as part of your studies. Maybe we'll speak to GIS and see if the Oz Football Hour can become sort of like required listening.
Lecturers.
Maybe you can get a credit. Yeah. Well, either way, very grateful to GIS for their support.
Absolutely.
GIS.sport/FNR if a postgraduate, a master's degree in a football specific area might be of interest to you. But let's get into round one. Jason, there's a bevy of exciting fixtures. I think you could make the case for just about all of the games that are taking place being appointment viewing. There are maybe a couple of possible exceptions, but an F3 derby, a Big Blue, and the Premiers against the champions headline the opening round of A-League men's action, starting with the latter of those, which is Melbourne City against Western United this Friday. Shall we start there?
Let's start there. And one quickly to acknowledge is actually just found out amid all of the different news come through. Scott Jamieson plays his 300th game on Friday night, the Melbourne City skipper. So obviously had stints at a few other A-League clubs before cementing himself as captain for Melbourne City. So congratulations to Jamo. Interesting grand final rematch Friday night, the start of the comp. It's going to be exciting. When you head along to that, are you going along?
I absolutely will be there. It's a 20-minute walk, not a drive, not a train. It's a 20-minute walk from my house, so I really have no excuses. I've actually, quite pleasingly, I've had people message me about wanting to go to the game, and not people who are A-League fans. So that's
good to hear.
Nice.
Good to hear. And prediction, what do you think is going to happen on Friday night?
Well, I really don't know. I think I could see. I often quite enjoy the games that these two sides play against one another. Western United really sort of, I think, had the better over Melbourne City, not just in the grand final, but throughout the regular season as well. I think Western United won one of the games, the other was a draw. I'm expecting excitement. These are two teams that haven't had too many changes where it relates to sort of the bulk of their squad. They've probably had sort of the least... The sort of slimmest in and out lists, but the players that they have both brought in are of some quality, particularly Melbourne City bringing in, 3 new visa players in Valon Berisha, Thomas Lamb and Richard van der Ven, who both all come in with pretty intriguing CVs. I mean, Berisha in particular. It still remains to be seen how much of those 3 that we see on the weekend. My mail is that Lamb seems the most likely of all of them to be in contention for a starting slot.
Yeah.
But, on the other side of the coin, you have Western United who have added pieces onto a championship defence. They haven't really lost all that much. Only a handful of departures for Yitzhak and Skotadis both going to Macarthur, and then Rene Krhin, who was a good player in flashes, but obviously because of his issues with injury, we never really got to see that much from him, and they've replaced those outgoings with Jacob Tratt, James Troisi, and Tongo Doumbia, who I've been told has been training the house down. So that really makes their midfield a force to be reckoned with, I guess, if he delivers on the preseason hype. It's really hard to predict this way. I think this game is going to go.
We said with the 12 teams, and we try to squash down into 6 finalists. I think these 2 are probably going to be right at the pointy end of the table at the end of the season. So it is hard to pick a winner. Are we going to go with predictions for who we think are going to win, loss, or draws with these games?
I think this game is going to be a 2-2 draw. Yeah, I just think that I can't see. My reason for the prediction is there will be some probably absentees for both sides, maybe some players who are coming off the bench to have their impact. I'm not 100% sure whether someone like Alex Prijovic, who we know was quite late to return to Western United, is in line to start, which throws the door open for that striking spot. As we mentioned, some of the visa players for City are perhaps not likely to come in. There's probably a bit more continuity for Western than there is for City. But in terms of the actual way that these two sides play, I can't see any reason for John Aloisi to adapt what he's done, and I don't think Patrick Kisnorbo is necessarily going to change on the fundamental principles, which while they didn't always work out last year, have delivered success in the past. And to that end, you know, both sides coming off the sort of the break, I think it'll be a draw, but I think it'll be exciting.
Let's hope for exciting. I'm still going to think a bit of a draw to start it off with, but let's hope we get some goals. Maybe 2-2 would be a nice little intro to the season.
Yeah. Where are we heading to next?
Brisbane Roar take on Macarthur at Suncorp Stadium. So they've got a few games. They're moving back to the big stadium.
Yes, I think Suncorp is now the predominant home. There will still be some games that are...
Weather hopefully is going to be okay.
Yes.
We talked about that. Charlie Austin, I'm very interested to watch. I saw a lot of him because the Brisbane Roar played many games down here in Melbourne for the Australia Cup. And initially in the first game against Heidelberg, I thought he was hobbling around, and then I found, noticed him a little bit more. That's probably his running style, his gait.
He goes about it. Yeah.
Correct. But I was super impressed with him defensively. For a striker, he was chasing very, very hard early. I watched him again in the rain at against Avondale as well. He'll be a big difference. So some of the passing that he displayed in those games and his ability to defend as well, welcome addition. He's going to be great for an interview and sound bites and the rest of it, which he's already shown, the whole park life thing. So that's going to be interesting. I don't think Roar are going to be great this season. However, at home against Macarthur, we talked about Macarthur's defensive perhaps frailties. And I might think Brisbane at home to start things off.
I think they will be better. I think they will be better, but I guess the big question around Brisbane is, will they be improved enough to actually challenge for the top 6? I mean, you could make the argument that maybe Charlie Austin alone, it gives them a pathway. They've absolutely got a shot, but yeah, they're probably one of the teams that I see missing out. Even though I do like the way that Warren Moon plays, I do like the players they've got at their disposal. I mean, glad to see Riku Danzaki back. Joe Knowles coming from the NPL Victoria. Obviously, I'm going to have a soft spot for him, and it remains to be seen how much of an influence or how much of an impact he has in a starting capacity. I'm pleased or interested to see Henry Hoare get the chance to kick on this season a little bit more as well. But Macarthur, the opening round, given the confidence that they seem to have, the togetherness that they seem to have, particularly in the wake of all the celebrations for Davila. I mean, we saw Alassane Touré pretty much break down talking about what it meant to get the win for his Mexican teammate. It's going to be hard, particularly when you contrast that against the sort of run-in that Brisbane have had. While, yes, they've improved, I think, on paper, but their off-season, off-field stuff, the appeal currently, against Corey Brown, it's pretty... It doesn't make for great viewing. No. So I think Macarthur are the sort of obvious favourites in this game. I see goals in it. I reckon maybe I'm going to say 3-2 Macarthur.
No, I think the Roar's going to get up at home, but not. They're not going to be convincing for the season. I agree with you there.
So you're going for Roar?
Yes.
Interesting.
It's just this week.
Okay.
Mariners news before we go into their game against Newcastle, a big one as well. So first of all, Garang Kuol has signed with Newcastle United. So some of the great news we had in the last week. So if you got a chance to see him in the 6 games leading up to the World Cup break, please do so. He's going an outstanding talent. We hope he progresses.
The Garungsky farewell tour.
Unfortunately, he's not in Melbourne. We won't get to see him. We might have to get on a plane or on a bus or something. And just want to acknowledge Matt Simon, who has announced his retirement as well after 252 games with the Mariners and a 60-odd with Sydney FC. A couple of games to Socceroos as well. Love him or hate him, he was a massive character and part of this league, and always something happened when he was running around like crazy. So well done on a fantastic career.
Yeah, here. As for the game itself, I mean, 2 of the more exciting teams, I thought, in the A-League men's last season. Obviously, one more successful than the other, that being Central Coast, who did make it into the finals. And I spoke to Nick Montgomery last week on State of Our Football Nation with George Danikian, Thursdays at 5 p.m. If you want to watch this coming show, which is going to feature Daniel McBreen, by the way, so that's cool. He felt like maybe they should have or could have won that game against Adelaide and maybe made it, right down to the pointy end, been a game away from the grand final. But they're a side, Central Coast, who I think are perpetually written off or underestimated because of their operating budget, because of what they've got at their disposal. And yet they managed to defy expectations again last season. Can you see more of the same from the Mariners this year? I mean, they have not only lost Matt Simon in the striking department, but Marco Urenia as well, who was a revelation before he was maybe overshadowed to an extent by Jason Cummings, even if they formed a good partnership.
Well, I think we got Cummings for the full season for one, right? And he's my tip for the Golden Boots, which means he's going to score goals at home. And these are the games that he will want to score goals in. And I think with Quoll having a 6-game cameo and a farewell tour, I think Mariners for this one. Newcastle have recruited well, though, too. You think they got Piscopo, they got O'Neill, they got a few others that have come into that team are going to be pretty handy. Mariners, I'm going to go Mariners at home for this one.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you too. I mean, Newcastle undoubtedly, as you've said, have improved and signed some high-quality players in certain areas of the pitch. A massive blow, of course, to lose someone like Daniel Pena. But I think as replacements go, Reno Piscopo is about as good as you could possibly hope for. I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of Brandon O'Neill, but there's no doubt that he is, a verified A-League talent. Like he's A-League caliber and towards the top end. So it's a useful player. Josh Sotirio is someone who I actually think had a bit of an underrated time, even if he was, quite direct, quite sort of one-dimensional. Same with Bahaja. Maybe these are players who, someone like Arthur Pappas, who we know likes to do things a bit outside of the square. If his playing style compared to the rest of the league was anything to go by last year, he can bring the best out of them. But I think the big problem, and the reason I am going to tip the Mariners in a game like this, is for all the improvements, the fresh players they brought in, I don't think that they have fundamentally improved what was their largest problem area, which was the centre of their defence last year. They played quite a high line, and the sort of slightly older, more experienced, a bit slower defensive pairing was caught out quite often, especially in games against the Mariners. And the fact that we haven't seen too much change in that department, I think they brought in Mark Natter, who might help, but, he's probably got some sort of time to integrate and prove that he can step in and be an improvement on what's there.
Carl Jenkinson from Melbourne City, the ex-Arsenal player as well, is at Newcastle in defence, and he's fairly solid. So
I guess he'll be a good organiser, but he's more of a full back, I suppose. They could throw him into the centre of defence, but I don't know. I still think that's going to be a problem area for them. Maybe less of one if the midfield does a better job defensively, but not enough to get them a result necessarily over Central Coast.
Yeah, I agree.
Another game, though, where I feel like there could be heaps of goals.
Yeah, well, let's hope so. Let's hope we kick it that way. Again, let's hope the weather doesn't interrupt. And then Sydney FC back against Melbourne Victory at Allianz Stadium, the return home to the revamped stadium. That's the Big Blue, Channel 10, free-to-air game. This will be very interesting. This will be good to watch, this one.
Absolutely, and we've heard some reports that there might even be somewhere in the midst of 30,000 turning up for this game. Victory have gone close to, if not now, sold out their away bay, which will be good because even if there's only 1,000 odd of them, they will make a great noise.
Always good atmosphere in these games. Always great
and
to
of
watch.
Course, it's the return to Allianz Stadium for the A-League men's side. So that, plenty of things to get excited about. As for the game itself, I think Victory are going to have a far more impactful season than Sydney FC. I mean, Victory are probably my tip for the championship. I think Popper might finally get that one that's been eluding him and lift the the toilet seat. Sydney I can see making the finals, but I can't see. I think this attempt to reinvigorate Sydney, play a new system, switch to a 4-3-3, it might be a kind of year-on-year plan. And my fundamental concern is it might not be something that Steve Corica is at the level of executing.
True, and Melbourne Victory are on display for the new owners as well too. So they'll be purchased today, 777. So they join a stable of clubs that include clubs from Italy, Brazil, Belgium, France and Spain, which is fantastic for them. I also have Victory up to the pointy end of the table and probably close to playing off for the premiership this season, and I think they'll kick off with a win as well.
Yeah, I think if they can go without any significant injuries in their defensive stocks, I think that's their big problem area, is if they get injuries. I mean, we're already seeing that Jason Garrier is going to spend a bit of time on the sidelines, so someone like Stephanie Groh is probably going to step in to fill that void at right back.
Yeah.
If they get any more injuries, and Mats Brandovich is someone who does have form, those are going to be big blows, because the likes of Noah Smith, George Timotheo, who they brought in as defensive cover, I've never been overly convinced by. So I think an unscathed Melbourne Victory, a full strength Victory side, are going to be a force to be reckoned with. But there is a chance that an injury to one of those defensive stalwarts could throw up a surprise. With that said, though, I think that's unlikely to impact this game. And I think Victory will get a 1-0 win. It'll be 2-0
for me. Yeah.
This will be tight.
2-0 for me, I think. 2 games to go on the Sunday. So Wellington Phoenix back playing in New Zealand, which is fantastic, against Adelaide United. Adelaide United, I think, are going to be up there around the top 6, as they generally are. If you've got Halloran and Goodwin up front, fantastic A-League players up there with close to two of the best players in the league, and Australian at that as well. Make a difference. Interesting to see how the Phoenix go at home. They were on the road for almost 2 years. Would they play like 3 games in New Zealand in the last 2 seasons? They actually performed quite well, all things considered. So hopefully the crowd get behind them. Everyone's there to welcome them back there in Wellington. They're going to be hard to beat at home, as they normally are anyway, but I think Adelaide, for me, are going to be one of the better teams this season. So I'm going to pick Adelaide for that one.
Yeah, I think ultimately Adelaide will have the better season. I mean, some people, I think, have even got Adelaide as a potential dark horse for finishing top, for maybe getting some silverware at the end of this season. It's hard to, it can be argued, but yeah, as you pointed out, adding Ben Halloran to create the king of goals and assists in Craig Goodwin is pretty devastating. And also, I think Hiroshi Ibasuki ended up having a pretty decent sort of...
Yeah, and he'll be better for the run too in terms of coming back. Craig Goodwin will have a lot to prove, because not being in that squad of 31 for the last 2 Socceroos games, even though he was one of the better players in the playoff against Peru, you would think his card's been marked and he's not going to the World Cup, so he'll have a big point to prove as well.
In spite of that, though, I think Wellington are going to win this game.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
I don't know. I think that the home crowd will make a massive difference, and I don't know as much of Wellington. I think they'll have not as good of a season because they have lost some real quality, but they've also picked up some good players too. I mean, Steven Ugarkovic is a massive introduction. I think he adds a real freshness to the base of the midfield, a bit more drive, something I think that they were lacking, particularly in those finals games, especially, final game against Western United. That sort of spark from midfield was something that slipped them by. And to add to that, Božidar Krajev is someone who was or is, I guess, a highly rated talent coming out of Bulgaria. If he can recapture any of that sort of ability, or channel that ability consistently and apply himself and return to be that player that some saw as one of the biggest talents coming out of Bulgaria, then maybe he'll be an extra bit of spark. But yeah, I think Adelaide will have the better season, but Wellington returning to New Zealand will have the win in this game.
And the final game of the round, the Wanderers hosting Perth Glory. So Perth had the season from hell last year, and it's not really starting so fresh for them as well, with not really having a home ground for most of this season as well, having to play out of Macedonia Park. So they're away for this one, and they've recruited a number of new players. So Wanderers is always a hard one. You think with the players and the list that they've got that they should be okay. I think they'll win at home. Bringing in Lawrence Thomas, Brandon Borello's back from overseas, as is Lawrence Thomas. Oliver Bazanic has come down from the Mariners to join them. So the Wanderers are going to be good, but Perth have a lot of new recruits. Some with some quality and some good CVs, and some will be complete unknowns. So interesting to see what they can do.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's 15 or 16 new players that they've brought in. And look, I like some of the names that have come in. I think there's some sort of interesting scouting missions, some young players that they're going to be putting their faith in. You know, Luka Ivanovic, an interesting transfer. I obviously, as someone who is a Hearts supporter in Scotland, I like the introduction of someone like Aaron McEneff. I think he is a really energetic player, and at only 27, he's the kind of visa player who you could see, if he has a positive impact, sticking around. Really, really excited by his introduction into the league. But in saying that, irrespective of how well or poorly you think Perth are going to do, there's no mistaking that for a relatively inexperienced coach like Ruben Zadkovic to integrate 16 players is probably going to, even with the world's longest off-season, is probably going to take a little bit more time.
Absolutely.
Whereas I think Western Sydney have got probably enough individual quality to get them over the line in this game. I'll be interested to see how Marcelo goes as well, the Brazilian centre-back that they've brought in. Again, another person who my sort of pre-season scouts have been telling me has been performing quite well. So he could be a massive, massive difference maker for them. So, yeah, I think this will probably be the more, I expect at least it to be the more convincing or the most convincing sort of win, comprehensive of the weekend.
Yep.
I'll get Western Sydney to have a win at home.
Wondrous for me as well, I think. Yeah.
So
That's the round.
Only one draw for me. I don't know about you, but I went one draw.
The Friday night for the draw, the same. But yeah, it'll be all completely different when we talk about this next week. We know that.
That's true.
That's the beauty of
probably
Australian football.
Almost every prediction, if not every prediction, will be wrong. Quick one
wrong.
Before we go, Jason. We're not going to bother with the top six because I will go into cardiac arrest if I have to, do that much brain computing. I'm even saying brain computing. That's how much I'm struggling with as it is. Quick fire: Golden Boot, Johnny Warren, Wooden Spoon, and Champions for you. Golden Boot. You mentioned it before, but you've gone with
Jason Cummings from the Mariners.
I'm going to say Jamie McLaren. I mean, why bet against the guy? He is many things. I don't love all of them, but a killer finisher is certainly one of them, and that's going to, I think, guide him to another Golden Boot. Johnny Warren medalist. I have actually gone for Craig Goodwin.
I would have him close. Look, I was tossing up between Brimmer and I think Nanny's going to take some votes away from him this season. So I'm going to go with a previous winner, but at a new club or second season in De Villa.
I think that's that's a very good shout. Wooden Spoon.
Perth Glory, we just mentioned. I think I can't see that many players gelling that quickly, playing out of a semi-professional type stadium.
I feel awful saying it, but I do think it's almost like, I think Perth as well, but it's not. It's not like a obvious candidate kind of thing. Like it's most like it's like who is the least good as opposed to who is the most bad. I guess. Yeah, I don't feel good about it, but I think Perth Glory will have to be the tip.
Yep.
Having said that, I fully expect them now to make the top six.
And Roar will finish. Roar will drop down.
And Champions, I said it before. I'm tentatively going, barring any long-term injuries, to a central defender. I'm going to say Victory. I think they've just, the quality that they have added, and perhaps some of the quality that they already had that perhaps underperformed and could return to their best, like a Chris Economides, for example, who had an injury-hit campaign. I think that's a pretty scary proposition.
I'm going Melbourne City. I think the Prem is probably going to come from this town. We had the top 3 last season, and there's a lot of stability in terms of coaching. Players have all brought in some improvements, the 3 Melbourne sides, but I'm going to go Melbourne City to win it.
Well, that's our official list. Those are our round 1 predictions. That's about all we've got on this week's edition of the Oz Football Hour. I hope you've enjoyed it, and you've enjoyed it with thanks to the Global Institute of Sport. Of course, we'll be back here on a Tuesday, the normal time slot.
Don't forget the keys.
No,
yeah.
I won't. The normal time slot next week from 6 to 7 Australian Eastern Daylight Time, as it is now, but ready next week to talk about all of the predictions that we got violently wrong. But until that time, we'll see you very soon.
Vickery looking to build. Barbarouses is quick. Is he in behind Topo Stanley? It doesn't matter! Costa Barbarouses! Wow!
Like a salmon, a spawning salmon. And Diamante again. Oh, he's done it!
Unbelievable kick from Maria.